Hello, my name is Shiva Kumar, and thanks for watching Umoja Shots, where we deconstruct a complex solution into a simple and understandable form, taking one issue at a time. Today, we are going to talk about travel management, an application that touches almost everyone in the organization. To do that, let's start with the blueprinting. The integrated Umoja has all the foundational processes and also the extension processes belonging to HR and travel. And the HR and travel, which constitutes the extension part of Umoja, brings in to the blueprint six additional modules: personal management, benefits, payroll, OM, time, and travel management. And in today's discussion, we are going to talk about travel management. Let's see the overall solution with the construct of enterprise role. The enterprise roles, which predominantly covers the travel management, are these: the travel and shipment administrator, and the certifying officer, and the shipment processor, and travel processing officer, and travel claims processor. And apart from that, you're going to have the employee self-service and HR partner and AP user and approver for claims processing and financial part of the travel solution. Let's go step by step. The travel management request process. How the request is created. A staff member in this example, using their employee self-service portal, creates a travel request. And the request goes for a certification and then go for an approval process. Based on our internal control framework, this transaction has to go through two levels of approval. And since the travel management do not originate from the funds management, the process by itself will have two approvals. If the travel request is of an entitlement type, then an additional approval of a HR partner is inserted in between the travel request and the certification. And if the entitlement travel request constitutes a shipping part, then the shipment also can be created based on an approved travel request or during the travel request submission process itself. So it will create a shipment request and it will go to the shipment unit for all the verification, and it goes to the certification for subsequent funds commitment and disbursement. Once the trip is approved, the travel can take place, and the staff member can proceed to the expense report after the trip is completed. The SAP process commits the fund only after the certification process. When the staff member creates a travel request internally in the system do not do the actual funds commitment. However, it marks what is called a statistical commitment for reporting purposes. On the travel management expense side, the staff member, after completing the trip, comes back and creates a travel expense report based on the approved travel request. If the travel expenses are of no change to that of the approved travel request, the system assumes it as an express claim and it automatically goes and do the FI posting and the clearing part. There is no additional certification. If the expense report is different than that of the approved travel request, it goes for a certification, and in certain cases it even go for second level of approval to the travel processing office. And after these two things are done, it goes to the travel claims processor, who will do the manual reconciliation of the request and the expense claim and do the settlement, and then proceeds to the FI posting and clearing, which is a manual step. The travel management in Umoja has four flavors. It has based on the trip type and the way in which the travel requests are created. It is on business travel, an entitlement travel, a group travel, or a shipping request. And all these type of travel can be done by the staff member themselves using employee self-service portal, or it can be done by an administrative services using on behalf services. Let's do the solution playback for the business travel. The business travel, the creation can be either by the staff member using the ESS or the travel administrator, And then based on the cost assignment, the certifying officer is selected and the document is routed to him, and the certifying officer, upon approval, it routes to the travel processing office based on the user selection of the travel processing office for that particular travel request, who will act as an approving officer. Let's see how this whole things work behind the scene. The travel request document, which is be created by ESSR on behalf, has three distinct parts. The first part is the trip details, which tells you the travel type, trip activity type, and from and to the destination part, and all the other information. The second type is the cost assignment part of the request. It has the cost center or a fund center, or it could be funded by the internal order or a WBS. The cost assignment is the placeholder for absorbing the cost for the travel which is going to be consumed by the staff member. And the third part is the travel processing office, which is the identification of an organizational unit which will perform the approving as well as the ticketing functionality for that particular travel request. To know all these process moving parts, let's go one level down to the basics. The basics starts with the staff members, how they are located in the enterprise-wise in the system. All staff members are related to an organizational unit. In Umoja, every staff member needs to be placed on a position, whether it is a staff or a non-staff, and that position will always have a funding source. And the position is also linked to an organizational unit. And an organizational unit always has a relationship of a travel processing office. And the last is an organizational unit will also have a relationship to a shipping office. For example, if I take a staff member who is working in ESCAP Bangkok, he has a position, and the position is funded by ESCAP HRMS fund. And an organizational unit, the travel processing office of ESCAP would be a Bangkok travel office, and it should be a Bangkok shipping office, which is also linked to the Bangkok ESCAP entity. The travel management features. As we explained, the staff or the initiator, who is the administrator, initiates a travel request. The organizational unit of the staff member is derived from the position, and the funding source is derived from the travel request. And also, based on the staff member's organizational unit, the travel processing office is also defaulted in the system. So the funding source is defaulting from the staff member's info type number 17. And the organizational unit is derived from the relationship of the travel processing office. And these values will be defaulted in the travel request whenever the staff member or initiator is trying to create a travel document. However, all defaulted values can be changed. If a traveler who is in New York is going to ESCAP, from ESCAP he is going to a different country, he can initiate the travel request in ESCAP, and the system will default all his New York funding source and the New York travel processing office, and the staff member can go and override the defaults depending upon his particular request of that specific travel. The certification process works like this. The trip request goes and has a cost objects, as we explained before, is the fund and the fund center. And the fund and fund center is always linked to a business area and an org unit. And there is a component in extension solution called structural authorization, which derives the relationship based on the fund center combination and the business area, and gets the set of certifying officers who has that particular enterprise role to be provided with the document for their certification. And the travel management approval happens in the same way, the similar way, but with a different approach. The trip request, which has been assigned with the travel processing office, which is linked to a business area and an org unit, determines the approvers of the travel request. The difference is the certification follows the costing and the approval follows the actual organizational unit. And the travel management approval is done by the travel and shipment processor. Let's do a solution playback with the understanding of all the basic things. A travel request, say for example, I picked up a person, Paul Andrew Thompson, whose index number, and he's in SCAP, DOA, CSS, and FMU. And the cost center is SCAP and the travel office is Bangkok. What it means is the cost center, which has been entered in the trip request, defaults to SCAP cost center and its fund. The system understands, or we already have in the system all the certifying officers for that particular fund and fund center cost center combination based on the delegation of authority. And the system automatically goes into this table and finds out all the people and sends the document for certification. When this document is certified, it will be routed to DOA CSS TU office for approval, because the travel unit, which is TU, is the organizational unit which is related to the SCAP entity. And once they do it, the trip is approved. The staff member, Paul Andrew Thompson, can commence his trip as per the approved travel request. Let's do the solution playback for the entitlement travel. All we have is one additional silos of an HR partner. The trip initiation is routed to the HR partner based on the org unit of the staff member, and then it automatically switches to the costing part because it has to go for certification, and it goes back to the organizational unit for the approving officer. Let's do the same playback of an entitlement travel. In this example, with the Paul Andrew Thompson with the same entity, he wants to do an entitlement travel. The system decides where Paul Andrew Thompson is located. So it finds out the SCAP, and then it goes to all the SCAP HR partners for approval. One of the HR partner who picks up the request makes sure the entitlement is valid, and he or she presses the OK or approval button. Then the system reads the cost object of the travel request and then goes to the certification officers as we explained in the previous slide. Then it goes to the travel approving officers as per the relationship of the travel unit to the SCAP entity. Then the trip is approved and the trip can be commenced. This is for creation of a new travel request. What happens if the travel request requires an amendment? The amendments have a little bit of a twist. The initiator who wants to change the approved travel request has to offline communicate with the certifying officers the necessity for the change or the amendments. The amendments could be the itinerary amendments, or it could be the amendments which results in the changes in the costing. So the certifying officers who, based on the delegation of authority, are the people who will initiate the amendment in the system, and they do the requested amendments, and then since after the request is amended, since the certifying officer is creating the amendment, the system understands that itself constitutes the certification, and it's routed to the travel unit for making the amendments, and the travel request will be amended. The certifying officers creates the amendment. So make sure there is a workflow shift, because the certifying officers currently who basically certify based on the amendments created by the travel administrator. In the new Umoja environment, the certifying officers will be the person who will be responsible for entering the amendment in the system depending upon the status of the document. The solution playback for the shipment. The shipment request is from an approved entitlement travel. So the cost center and the shipment office is also taken from the travel request document. And then when the shipment request is created, the system first finds out the travel shipment processor, which is an organizational unit, and all the people under the organizational unit. And the shipment processor validates based on the UN established policies whether the shipment is done within the policy governance. And once they approve or not, once they concur with the request, the document is routed to the certification officers based on the cost center and the fund. Once the certification officers, based on the delegation of authority, receives the document, one of them can approve it, certify it, and the document can be the approved document is now taken to the funds commitment place, where the procurement solution takes care of the actual shipment, the contract, and all the other processes which happens offline. The solution playback for the expense report is the staff member or the administrator initiates the expense report from the travel request. The expense report can happen in two different ways. One, from the completed travel request, or it can be a standalone expense report. I'm taking the first example of creating an expense report based on an approved and completed travel request. The staff member initiates the travel request, and if the expense report is same as that of the approved travel request in terms of days and there is no cost implication, the express expense report is initiated and the FI documents are created in the backend, and everything is completed behind the scene without any additional approvals. Remember, if the staff member chooses the express claim, no other approvals are necessary, and also it should be exactly same as that of the approved travel request. If the travel request expense report is created, and if the expense report is not same as that of the approved travel request, if there is a more number of days have been consumed in the travel than the approved travel request, or there are additional cost implication, the expense report will have additional cost than that of the approved travel request. Then the system will automatically takes the document for the certification process based on the delegation of authority, and after the certification, it goes actually to the travel claims processor. The travel claims processors will be the person who will be actually doing the reconciliation and posting the FI documents. Any change in the expense report will enforce the recertification of the document. And another variations of additional approvals necessary for an expense report. If the travel expense report has the cost implication, and also if constitutes a non-UN paid ticket expenses, it will take for the certification to establish the variation in the cost to be certified, and it also go to the travel processing office to make sure the governance is also taken care in terms of the ticket price paid by the staff member, which is not paid by the UN in the first place. And upon approval, it goes to the travel claims processors, and the travel claims processors do the reconciliation and post the FI documents. The certification and travel processing officers follows the funding source of the initial document. The travel claims processor is a new role which has a lot of work which constitutes, and they are responsible for approving a travel expenses coming through the workflow. And Umoja Design has a travel matching desk which is used to automate the posting of the vendor invoices against the travel documents. The travel claims processor is also responsible for FI posting from the trip in a standard Umoja process, and approval of the travel request initiates the FI posting, and the initiator can select a bank of the disbursement during the request process. The travel, there is a role called accounts payable travel vendors, and they are currently mapped to an AP role which follows the SAP Foundation, Umoja Foundation process. And then we created a separate role to manage the travel vendor payment, which is a subset of an AP user and an approver. Let's talk about the travel administrators. The travel and shipment administrators, all with no Secretary General, will have variations of all local staff, consultants and independent contractors, UN volunteers and uniform personnel. And they are the people who will be creating, managing and process all travel and expense requests on behalf of a staff or a non-staff. And they only have portal access. They cannot come into the SAP ECC system for any functionality. The other travel roles are the travel claims processor, a travel and shipment vendors management, and they also have two additional roles for display and reports. The display and the reports enterprise roles are always integrated to the any constructive travel role. So there is no need to request for this particular roles in addition to the travel administrator or travel claims processor role. The user provisioning in SAP or Umoja has a dual part, and when a person is requested with an enterprise role, the system also expects the relationship of an entity, and once the relationship entity is also given, all the roles are assigned and all the structural authorizations are maintained, so that the person who have been assigned with the role can do the self-service, they can do all the transactions, they can also display and report, and they can also manage the workflow. If in case of travel administrator, the difference is the structural authorization is open. In the sense, if I request for a travel administrator, the relationship for the travel administrator to the organization is always at the highest level. In the sense, a travel administrator in SCAP can also create a travel request for a staff member whose position is linked to an organizational unit which is in New York headquarters. The suggested role mapping for an SCAP part is an SCAP travel service center who will be managing all the field offices, and the travel processing office and travel administrations are kind of an service delivery model approach. And approvals, all approvals are managed by a component called Approval Work Center. If you need more information on Approval Work Center, please see my Umoja shots on Approval Work Center. And overall recap, these are all the roles which gives you the complete picture of the travel solution. And as I said, the employee self-service, HR partner all, AP approver, or the supporting roles, which is also be a key in creating and approving the travel documents in the travel solution. And thank you, and thanks for watching. Bye.